morning, everybody. Welcome to Tuesdays on the Daily Huddle with Tara and Kathryn, where we talk about everything to do with relationships and communication, because we know that better relationships build better families, better businesses, better communities, and opens our hearts. So today we're going to talk about something that may seem a little off topic, but it's totally not, as usual. And our question is, are you part of a movement? And I am curious, I've done a little bit of looking at this and research on this, and it's funny, Chase just joined. He'll be with us in a second. I was curious, I have a question for him about this. But Tara, why don't you start us off with where this came from? Are you part of a movement?
Yeah, so I, not surprisingly, have studied a lot of the neuroscience of connection and the power of movement. But it got me thinking about it yesterday because I turned on the news and I saw all these people gathering in droves to be together to experience the eclipse. And it just really got me thinking about the power of a movement versus an organization, why organizations are trying to shift to this movement mentality, and what qualifies as a movement. So I can certainly share some science around it, which I'll do in a little bit. But I think the first thing I'd like to do is share my own experience with some movements.
Okay, let's do it.
And so I first want to share a personal perspective around a movement. And the two that come to mind for me growing up and raising a family in the South are the movement of the cheerleading culture. And the other one is the mega church. And I've never felt comfortable in either one of those settings, not even anywhere close. But they collect people in masses. So I'll start with the cheerleading experience and share an interesting story. And I think this is a big part of what defines a movement and why they're so powerful. My daughters got into competition cheerleading, which is all consuming. It's expensive. You spend enormous amounts of time, money, energy to take your daughter to these competitions where they perform for 2 minutes and 30 seconds. And the rest of it is just running around and glitter with Dippin' Dots and, whatever the case may be. But they practice for this really, really hard, but it really does kind of consume your life. And early on in this cheerleading movement, as a matter of fact, it was after the very first competition. I brought my daughters home from that competition and I sat them on the couch. I'll never forget this. They're sitting on the couch and I'm standing in front of them. And I said to them, if you ever treat me again the way you treated me this weekend, you will never go anywhere near cheerleading again. Because so many of the young ladies are kind of have that princess syndrome. Like they're the little princess and the mom's rubbing their feet and making sure they're all perfectly made up and have the little goodie bag. And I had a real problem with that.
Mm-hmm.
Those just weren't my values. I didn't want to communicate to my daughters that they were princesses. I just did not want that. And so years go by and they never did treat me like that again.
Mm-hmm.
But years go by and I'm sitting at one of these competition cheerleading events and all the girls are off practicing or something. And I say to the moms, I'm like, y'all, why do we do this? Why do we give all this money and time to cheerleading and then we take our whole weekend here to basically wait on our daughters? And this mom said to me, and I'll never forget it, she said, Tara, don't you want your daughters to be cheerleaders in high school? Like, the answer was so obvious to her and so not obvious to me. And I share this because I remember thinking, no, I do not want my daughters to be cheerleaders in high school. Maybe they will be, that's fine, but that certainly wasn't a goal of mine. I share this because I realized in that moment that most of the people in that movement had aligned values and goals, and I just wasn't aligned. And I think that's a big part of a movement is that you're comfortable in communicating, for example, in a megachurch setting, because you know that all the people have very similar beliefs to you. And that is the feeling of connectivity. It makes you feel safe. It's not risky. So before we dive into movements for others, I thought it might be fun just to share a personal experience about what really makes a movement so powerful. I think a big part of it is aligned values.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right. I think because a movement it is good to define what it is. And a couple things came through when you were talking is working towards a common goal or outcome. Could be to change the world, could be to see your daughter and be a cheerleader in high school. You know, it sounds like an odd thing to call that a movement, but they were all working towards a common outcome.
Mhm.
And in some way, they thought that was going to better their lives, better their daughter's life. And I think to call something a movement, there is an element of it's going to make something better for me, my life, and perhaps the world. And then I also think that there's an attraction element of a movement, as opposed to I'm going to sign up for it or I'm going to force you to come do it. Like if I go to a job that I don't really love and it's not for something greater, I'm not attracted. There's not a magnetic pull to that. That's something I go and I just do.
Mhm.
But with a movement, there's like this magnetic pull, like I'm drawn to it, you know, and I just,
100%.
yeah, really want to do that. So, yeah, so I think that that's a really interesting example that you gave because it's not something that I would normally call a movement.
If you're
A
a part
cheer.
of it, I think you would.
Well, I mean, well, that's interesting though, because it's like I hear you and I totally agree now. I just am, you know, because to me, I don't have a value around it. So, you know, and I think that again, what you said is really important that yeah, for those people to all be aligned around something, they do have similar values.
Mhm.
You know, what is it? Like what is it about the eclipse that drew so many people together? Who knows? They may be different reasons, but they all are around something in the natural world, something about an event that's happening, you know, infrequently, if you will. Um, and I think, you know, it's also important to talk about what people get out of a movement because a lot of people stay in movements, you know, for a really long time. And then some people dip in and dip out because their values change or life circumstances change. You know, using your example, what do you think that those women got out of being part of the movement?
I think the comfort and the no risk setting of communicating their values with knowing that people around them were aligned. And um, let's take a step back from that because that might be a little bit narrow minded. Um, I think that they were supporting their daughters or sons, some little boys too, dreams,
Mhm.
and that feels good.
Yeah.
That's
And I
why I
think,
was there. I mean, you know, it wasn't about me; it was about my daughters, but they loved it, and so they're sat my happy ass.
well, and I think another, you know, ingredient for this is a sense of belonging. If you don't have a sense of belonging while a part of a movement, I don't think that that's something that would last. You know, I don't think somebody would stay in that very long. A lot of people join it because of the sense of belonging or even sometimes a sense of identity. If you're struggling to know where you fit in the world and here's something that offers you that, you know, it's a place where you can stand and get some boundaries. I think it's such an interesting topic because I think there are things that we join that we want to join as part of movements. And then if you look at business, you mentioned that a lot of businesses are moving more towards a movement versus
They're
just
trying.
trying, yeah,
Yeah.
versus just a work environment, if you will. And largely, I think well, I think there's a lot of reasons, but I think because they can draw a lot. I mean, you can draw a lot more clientele. You can have employee retention because of this magnetized sort of energy around it. They're all there for a common purpose. How do you see that playing into this?
Well, I like you have done some research on this, and it's not an easy feat because there are some components to what can really drive a movement. My favorite movement to study, quite honestly, is the mega church.
Hmm.
There's so much organizational psychology into why they're so wildly popular, but I'll share a few of those and apply them to what I've uncovered about what actually can really make a movement successful. And the first we're already talking about is hyper-connected community. So,
Mhm.
you know, those mega churches also have small groups.
Mhm.
And there is so much research that shows if it weren't for both, they wouldn't be as wildly popular as they are. So it feels good to the human to know that they're there to be connected to others with like minds. And it also feels good because the spirit of a church is to give. So it
Mhm.
doesn't feel like a full self-fulfilling experience. Another component of movements is that people there have lived experience. So what do I mean by that? The most passionate people in the Epilepsy Foundation, their families are affected by epilepsy.
Mhm.
They're the ones with the stories. When my daughter was more involved in an organization that you're familiar with called Extra Special People out of Athens, um, so many people that were involved in it were drawn to it, not because it affected them personally, but because the people whom it did affect personally shared their stories.
Mm.
Builds a
Mhm.
movement. So
Yeah.
there's emotion around that. there's also a mindset that we have to be going somewhere. And that kind of
Mhm.
goes back to that little cheerleader conversation. Like, what is the end game? Not like it's going to finish, but people want to see not only stories, but they want to see data and they want to see progress.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I liken it to, and my husband and I talk about this a lot. My cousin runs a nonprofit called Switch for Good, and they're trying to encourage people to live a dairy-free and or plant-based lifestyle. Well, how in the heck he's like, how do they make money? How do they measure that? I mean, it just blows his mind. I mean, he's an engineer. And the only way that they can really measure it at first is through digital communication, clicks and links
Right.
and that has grown. But the other piece of it is they're helping to change laws.
Mhm.
So and this takes me to another topic is one of these components is think back to the death of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement. It wasn't only the death of George Floyd that built a movement. The Black Lives Matter movement was already growing some momentum. As a matter of fact, there's a famous quote by Obama because he was president when it first started growing. And he says, I think the quote is, I even wrote it down. He said, they can't just keep on yelling. Like there has to be an end game. Well, today, since George Floyd's death, there have been 30 states who have adopted over 140 bills in support of police reform. That's a powerful movement.
Mhm.
Because it affects people's hearts. It touches them. The only other piece I have is that people thrive under crisis. That's the fifth one. Is that when there is crisis, it absolutely builds more power to a movement. And I can even liken that to the church. When people are in
Mhm.
the most difficult times, they tend to lean more towards their small group and community and support in the church, knowing that there's something bigger than themselves. So
Wow.
power,
Yeah,
powerful.
it's fascinating. It is powerful. And I think about the Down syndrome community that we're a part of because of my son and the passion that comes from that and just knowing that there are people going through similar things and what that can build. I mean, you talk about this all the time that we're built for community. And so I want to talk a little bit about, and I do want to hear from others about what, are you a part of a movement? Are you building a movement? But how can this help us? Like, how can this conversation help us? If I'm walking away from that, I'd be like, well, that's great, great information. But like, what can I do? I have some ideas, but I'm curious with that question. Like, what does this conversation give us?
Um, well, I've thought about this too because it seems to me that we have a lot of entrepreneurs that are part of the Daily Huddle. And so if I'm an entrepreneur or an artist or anyone trying to build something, I think the question is, how do I take this information and apply it to my world? How do I make my business less of a transaction and more of a movement?
I love that. And I can agree with that. And also with employees or an organization, because it's how do you get any leader, really, any leader, which we are all leaders in some way, how do we get people to follow us, follow our vision, commit to our vision, if we don't like the word follow, but be in line in agreement with what we've got going on so that they can support it because it means something to them, and I think building around that really does speak to our human interaction, which goes directly to what we talk about, which is relationships and communication.
Mhm.
I love what you say or how you said it about how can you make it, maybe you didn't say it this way, but you said transactional. So how can we make it more relational and less transactional?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd like to know what you think, but my sense is a couple things. One is to continue to share the stories and the
Yeah.
data. We need both to stay part of a movement. Something else I uncovered, Kathryn, that I think you and I probably could do a better job of with our movement that we're growing, Fem Forward,
Hmm.
is we need more communication, more
Hmm.
connectivity. Um,
Hmm.
just like any relationship, we cannot assume that people are going to remain passionate if we're only reaching out, once or twice a month. There needs to be this consistent communication, and people need to see progress, growth.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I think that's so true. I think, yeah, so, and going back to the question of what can we take away from it, I think that's it. How can I contribute to the movements that I'm a part of in a meaningful way? Because that fills me up, that fills my bucket. And what can I create as a leader in the world to how can I communicate better about what the movement is and where we're going and where we're headed? So people then go, oh, yeah, I want to get on board with that versus have you done that thing? Have you done that thing? I think that it can really transform our experience.
No doubt about it. No doubt. I think I saw it pared down in one sense to a movement can do one of three things: influence beliefs. So if you think about, I go back to the plant, animal activists and people who are passionate about the earth.
Mm-hmm.
They're one by one want to influence beliefs, which change behavior, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that certainly can be measured. The other is money, to allocate money. And if it's something that you are passionate about for whatever the reason, that helps people to actually invest. And then, of course, to change laws. And one of those three things, when they're combined with whatever transaction you're trying to encourage your audience to be a part of, if it's going to affect their beliefs or increase their income or change a law, it builds passion and people tend more to stay connected to it. Do you know what I was thinking about this morning? It feels like it was a trend, and now it's not. I think it's maybe been overdone. I don't know what the data is on it, but I think back to, do you remember Tom's shoes? I know they're still around.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah.
They're basically like all of a sudden, and I think it was a phase when I don't care who you were proud to wear them.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of cheaply made, but you remember what they stood for, right?
Mm-hmm. Because they gave a pair of shoes
Yeah.
to, I don't remember exactly where, but it was an undeveloped, underprivileged country or something like that. Yeah.
Every pair bought, one was gifted to
Mm-hmm.
people in need who needed shoes. Then
Yeah.
the Warby Parker, the glasses people did it. The
Mhm.
Bomba socks people did it.
Yeah.
There's many more examples of that. And I feel like that took off for a while. And what's sad about it is we don't get as excited about it anymore because it's become more commonplace.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I want to hear from other people and see what's out there and what's showing up for you. Are you part of a movement? Or do you have questions or comments? I think I think it would be really interesting too to hear what movements people are a part of, because again, your cheerleading example really, I wouldn't have thought of that unless you described it and then you talk about it. Um, and I think a movement can be anything if it has these components, like you say, like you're making progress, you're moving towards something.
Absolutely.
And let's
What
see.
what movement would you say you're a part of, Kathryn?
Well, I definitely am part of I guess I would call it sort of equity and inclusion with my son.
Mhm.
And, we were just in Wilmington, over the weekend, and we stopped at a coffee shop called Biddy and Bowes. And it's, Biddy and Bowes employs, only people who have special needs. And, many of them have Down syndrome. And so we always go and try to support when we're there. And their slogan was, changing the way we see other people. I may have that just slightly wrong, but it's something about changing the way that we see other people. And that's exactly, how I want to be a part of that. Like when we were in there, my son was not happy about being there and, wanted to leave and was trying to turn over chairs and he started screaming. And one of the people behind the counter said, "Hey, lower your voice." And somebody else said, "No, it's okay." So it was really interesting to be in that environment, one, for it to be acknowledged. A lot of times people just ignore it, which is fine too. But to be in a place where I knew it was okay, I didn't have the same nerves or anxiety that come up sometimes when he starts to have an episode or starts to scream out or throw something. And so I am and want to be a part of that movement of like changing the way that we see people in the world, and accepting them where they are, whatever that looks like.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I'd love to hear that. It's given me pause when we said, "Are you part of a movement?" It's really made me study myself and how much, like, I don't feel comfortable in large religious gatherings.
Hmm.
I didn't like the cheerleading movement. And now I'm thinking about how much, if I'm perfectly honest, that I'm surrounded by parents with adults with special needs, and I'm never quite comfortable there either. And
Hmm.
I think it's because I have an insecurity that I'm not as good at it as they are. And that's
Hmm.
like super honest here.
Hmm. I can appreciate that and can share. a similar feeling about that. Mine with my son is that he doesn't quite fit into, and this is something that I've just made up over the years. He doesn't quite fit into the Down syndrome community because of his seizure disorder. It puts him on a sort of he's further behind. So we would watch his peers continue on, and they might be delayed compared to a typical peer, but significantly delayed. And so I always didn't feel comfortable in those settings because it just felt like a very different experience. But here's one of the things that I've learned about the diversity, equity, and inclusion movement is that, it used to be that, to look for the similarities, and try and find the commonalities. And now what I've learned about myself is that, my brain naturally does that. It patterns. It says, oh, I've seen this before, it must mean this, or I've seen that before and it must mean that. And that's so not true because we're all so different. And so for me to be in any situation, I was thinking about your large church gathering, like for me to be in that situation and to be really open to whatever anyone believes and why they're there it's a challenge for me to be really present in that moment and open and say, oh, it may not be what I thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning I came from a really religious family and I have some negative connotations with things like that. So I might look at somebody who goes to church a lot and make up that they're a certain way, but who knows? And so how can we celebrate the differences that exist? Even within a movement. Just because we have similar values doesn't mean that we believe all the same, we come from the same place. And there's a lot there to be explored and experienced to enrich our own experience in life.
Yeah, you know what I'm pulling out of this as I'm sitting here and listening to you, and I certainly didn't intend to go here, but why I've found myself uncomfortable in certain settings. And I think it's a message to those of us who are part of a movement who do feel like they have a leadership role in that movement. And it's to remember that not everyone is as comfortable as they are and has their aligned values. When I was young, I used to go to church with friends. When I would spend the night on the weekend, we
Oh,
go
yeah.
to church.
Yep.
And I'm realizing now that's where the discomfort was born
Hmm.
because they were there every weekend with their families. My mom was like Christmas, Easter, and maybe on a whim, church mom. And so I was never comfortable there because I didn't know what they knew. They
Hmm.
started talking about the Bible and all these stories. And the older I got, the more they knew, the less connected I felt to being able to sit there. I didn't feel like, I almost felt like, I wasn't worthy to sit there because I didn't know what they were talking about. And that's
Hmm.
probably a reason why I pulled out of church settings. I think it started really quite early. So, as usual here on the Daily Huddle, I'll thank y'all for this therapy session.
Well, and I think one more thing about that you said is inspiring us as leaders is it tells me that, like, especially as a leader or in any sort of a setting where I have power, there's any sort of hierarchy, it's like I need to be that much more inclusive and curious and, about welcoming everyone, because even if somebody joins a movement that they think they're a part of, there's still room to feel not quite connected, like you and I've experienced in, the special needs community. So it's like, how do we be more welcoming? Because what else is there? I mean, we're all humans, we're all on this path together. Like, how do we just make each other feel a bit more welcome?
I think that, is a powerful takeaway for me for sure to remember when I'm in a setting and I am feeling confident in a leadership role, somebody there is feeling the way I feel at church.
Right, right.
Florence, hello.
Good morning, everyone. Not really deep conversation this morning. I've been listening and I'm thinking, what I'm asking myself, what movement am I a part of? I have never really been, well, I mean, there's a few times in my life that I've been a part of something that you might call a movement. And for me, there has to be a greater purpose why I'm a part of that movement. For me, my seeking has been to find true. This has always been my seeking, to find true love and true acceptance universally. So anything. I mean, I guess as a child, I felt excluded in our neighborhood, and it wasn't a nice feeling. And I also felt not accepted in school, like never felt a part of anything. So it's not a nice feeling. But I'm also conscious that there's a lot of people in the world that feel this way. So my search has been what it is that can help everyone to feel accepted. And I know that the word is love. So for me, anything that I see as true love, I feel a part of it, even if I'm not with it, even if I'm not in that group. So that's where the movement I feel I'm a part of is just love, the love movement, true love. And I call it, and I know the word I want is unconditional love. So anything that I feel, I see as being unconditional love, doesn't put conditions on people. That is the movement I'm a part of. So I'm a part of a movement. It might not be very evident to other people, but what I practice in my daily life, and moment to moment, I see as a movement, and I'm believing that when it affects people, the movement will grow. The more true I am to that, and the more when I interact with others and I share that with others, then that movement will grow, a movement of unconditional love universally. That's the movement I'm part of. So,
I love that, Florence. Thank you for sharing that. What I took away from that, among other things, is having the mindset of a movement, because you said it's everything that you are and how you interact and how you be, if you will. And I love that, to be part of the love movement in every way that you interact with other people. It's such a beautiful way to think about it.
Yes, it gives me certainly a sense of peace. And so thank you for that reminder.
Yeah.
Do you have any last thoughts, Kathryn? Because if not, I think that she gave us a beautiful way to close this out.
I think she did. I think let's leave it there.
Yeah. So give some thought to if you're involved in a movement, why that matters. There's so much science around just being connected for a single purpose. And if your organization, if the purpose is not clear, that's something to give thought to, because people really need to understand why they're a part of something. And I think that Florence probably said it best. Why are we a part of the Daily Huddle? And that's going to be number one, love, unconditional love, just to look for the gifts in all people. And they're so plentiful. So thank you for that reminder. And another tenet of the Daily Huddle is to give. And that's a big part of being a movement, is that generous spirit, something bigger than yourself. So remember to give of your heart and your time and your talents. And don't take life too seriously. Throw that head back. Let yourself laugh. Like Kathryn laughed today at her lost job as a masseuse. And take care of yourself. Take care of that body. That means to get your rest. Eat mostly plants. Try to stress less, and absolutely get up off that booty and move that body. We love you all, and we'll see you next time on the
Thank
Daily.
you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Excellent job.
Thank y'all so much.
Thank